Now, Supabase is a very powerful and also a very easy to use backend that you can use to power your next app. But did you know that you're probably using a small percentage of Supabase's amazing features? There's some very powerful features that you may not even be aware of. And so in today's video, we are going to be using some of Supabase's more powerful but very useful features that you definitely will be using in one of your next apps. And we are going to be doing this with the awesome help of BuildShip, an amazing no-code builder that I use with lots of my apps. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I discuss on this channel are available to view and or clone via my Patreon page. And if you're still not a member of our amazing Patreon community, then you should definitely check it out via the link in the description below. Now, if you head over to BuildShip.com, you're going to be on a page that looks something like this. Now, I already have my free account. And so if you do not have your free account just yet, you should be able to register right here. When you do that, you'll be able to click on Open App, and you're going to be redirected here. Now, the way BuildShip works is that you create workflows that are triggered with some event. And so here you're looking at my BuildShip setup, and currently I don't have any workflows. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and I'm going to create a new workflow. Now, because we're going to be connecting to a Supabase instance, I'm going to name this Supabase demo here. And I'm going to click on create. Once I do that, the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a trigger. So if you click here, you have various triggers that you can choose from, and you cannot really start building your workflow without creating a trigger. A trigger is what starts your workflow, and as a result, you can have all kinds of different triggers that work in all kinds of different ways. So like a BuildShip trigger, Firebase, REST API call, which is a trigger you're going to be using a lot actually, but we also have others. And one trigger that you're going to be using for this tutorial is a Supabase trigger, okay? And this is a trigger that creates a database webhook on Supabase. In other words, this workflow will be executed when there is an event on the provided table, okay? So if we add this trigger, we have the beginning of our workflow, and this trigger is extremely powerful because it's going to let us know when something of interest happens on a specified table. And as you're going to see a little bit later in the video, there are tons and tons of use cases where you want to use such a setup, because it's going to make very complicated workflows, very complicated setups a lot easier when you're building your app. Now, before we configure this trigger, before I show you what exactly this trigger is going to be doing, I think it's important to show you an overall architecture so that you have a better idea of where exactly this specific trigger is going to make your life a lot easier. And so here I have a diagram that has lots of things happening here, but let's start with this section here. So anything inside of this box here, right, with this dashed border here, this is an app. This is your app. So we have a user. They are going to be interfacing with your app via a UI layer. We have an app layer, and last but not least, we have a database layer. In our case, this is going to be our Supabase database. And so all apps are like this. Any app that you build, it's going to follow, this architecture, right? You have UI layer, app layer, and a database layer. Now, what we are doing differently in our app is we are setting up a triggers. And here in the step one, we are using BuildShip to automatically create this trigger for us. So once we create this trigger, Supabase will now send various events to us when something of interest happens on a specific table. So in this step two, we are going to be receiving various events. So we're going to be notified when things like inserts, updates, or deletes happen on a specific table. And finally, in step three, our trigger will get triggered, right? Our trigger will finally execute. And this is where you are going to configure the rest of your workflow like we're going to be doing in just a minute. And so in a nutshell, what's really happening here is we are telling Supabase, hey Supabase, we want to know anytime something happens on a specific table, let us know, okay? And when Supabase lets us know, when Supabase notifies us, we are going to be executing another workflow that will essentially do something useful. All right, so now that you hopefully understand what these triggers are, how they get triggered, and the various, responses that we can take when a trigger gets triggered, you may be asking yourself, well, this is nice and all, but how practical is this? Can you show me an app where this is invaluable? Can you show me a use case, a scenario where I'm going to look at, I'm going to say, okay, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. Well, I actually have an app that I built that will show you an invaluable scenario that you definitely need triggers to make it all happen. And you're going to be wondering by the time you finish this, how you've never used triggers before, because they're so helpful and really invaluable in many of these situations. So here I have a very simple Flutterflow app. Flutterflow is an amazing no-code builder that I use for all of my apps. And let's go ahead and run this app so that I can show you exactly what it does. So here's our very simple app, and all we have here is a business where other users can come in and write a comment, ask a question, start a discussion. And this is a very common scenario in all kinds of social media apps, or like Google Maps reviews, and lots of different things, right? People replying to blog comments, people replying to various reviews, people writing reviews, etc. This is a very common scenario. And when I click on this button, it's going to generate a random comment with some random data. Okay, so if I click here, now we have a random comment. Now the user ID actually belongs to me because you have to log into this app, but everything else is completely random. So we have a random comment, we have a random number of likes, and we have a random number of replies under this comment, okay? A random image as well. So if I click another, write a post, that's going to create another comment. Now, wouldn't it be nice to have an ability to automatically log all the interactions that are happening on our app? So as users are leaving comments, they are replying to comments, they are maybe sending messages, we want to log these events. Now, this kind of functionality is actually very common throughout all kinds of apps, right? Apps typically want to log various pieces of information just to track what's happening, right? Is this feature popular? Is this feature not popular? Is anybody using it, right? Are people leaving some kind of bad comments that need to be deleted, right? There are all kinds of use cases for this. Now, this kind of feature is actually pretty tricky to implement. It's actually very tricky to make it work in real time, okay? And that is exactly what we want. We want to be notified in real time when something happens to a particular table. Now, if I go into my Supabase instance here, I have a table here, a user post, and this table is storing these comments that are being inputted by users, right? So here are the two records that represent these two comments here, right? So we have the user ID, and this is the currently logged in user ID. We have the post content, we have the number of comments and the number of likes, all randomly generated. Now, what we can do is we can configure a trigger on this table to let us know anytime there's some change being done to this table. So if users are inserting, updating, deleting various records on this table, Supabase can notify us on that. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing with this Supabase trigger in BuildShip. And so now that you hopefully understand a real world scenario where it could be useful for us to get notified anytime, things happen with a particular table. And I'm also going to be showing you a couple of other real world scenarios a little bit later as well. The next thing that we need to do is we need to configure this Supabase trigger so that it is triggered when a particular change happens on a specific table, and also complete our our workflow here. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to click on this fingerprint icon here. So as you can see, it's red right now, and that is because it's not yet configured. So it says here, no account selected. So if I click here, I'm going to see an account, and that is because I already connected my Supabase instance to this BuildShip workflow, and that way my BuildShip workflow can connect directly to my Supabase instance, which is exactly what you want. Now, initially, you're not going to see anything here. So what you need to do is you need to click on Add Account, and you're going to have this dialog box pop up. And this dialog box essentially is going to ask you to grant permissions to your Supabase instance, or have Supabase grant permissions to this BuildShip instance. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to click on Authorize BuildShip. I already did that, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to close out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to select my account. When I do that, this fingerprint icon turns blue, which means that it is now configured. So now BuildShip has access to my Supabase instance. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to fill out these fields. So I need a project reference. I need to specify the various events that we're going to be listening to. And then I need to specify the table schema as well as the table name. So let's go ahead one by one. So the project reference, if you go back to your Supabase here, what you want to do is you want to click on project settings, and you have this reference ID here. So we're going to copy this for your project, go back here and paste it. For the events, we can specify an insert, or we can specify all of them. So if I specify all of them, I'm going to get notified anytime anything happens on that table, which is kind of cool actually. So we're going to leave this, click done. Table schema. Well, what table do we care about, right? So if I click here, I'm going to go to my table editor. I have various tables, but the table in question, this is the table that gets data put in anytime that the user writes a message, right? Writes a comment. This table is called a user post, and this is all configured inside of Flutterflow. And I'm going to show you later as well how to do that. But this is the table that we're dealing with. So let's go back into BuildShip. The schema is public and the table name is a user post. So now that we have this trigger configured, you can click on ship, and that's going to deploy your code into the cloud, which means that this trigger is going to be active now. So now it's deploying, it finished deploying, and now this trigger is active. And so now if you go back to your app, and you click on this, we are inserting a record into that table, and we are also listening on various changes with this trigger. And that means if you click on here, you can look at different log data and you can see your trigger being triggered. So as you can see, we have that one trigger, and that is because we just deployed this workflow and we put some data into that table. And so we have this. Now, if you click here, you're going to see all the information that could be useful to you, right? So if you scroll up and you take a look from the top and you scroll down, you see that you have body, you have old record. Old record is null, and old record is only going to appear if you're updating a record, right? Because when you're updating, you're going to have old and new. When you're just inserting, you don't have an old record. So if you scroll down, we have a record, and this is our new record. This is a random record that was used to trigger this whole workflow, right? And so as you can see, it says num comments 65, num likes 63. And if we go back to our app here, and if you scroll down, you see this new comment here, right? All the way at the bottom, because it's the newest one a moment ago. And it says here 63 likes, 65 comments. And if you go back to BuildShip, this is exactly what triggered this workflow. Okay, so we have all of this data, and this is going to be useful when you need to reference this data. And so now we have a trigger, but we don't have anything else. And as of now, as of how it is right now, it's not very, very useful to us. The next thing that we need to do is, well, we need to figure out what do we want to do with this trigger, right? What is our use case? Well, our current use case is we want to log all kinds of these different messages into another table. So I have created another table called a activity log, and this is a very, very simple table. We just have the user ID, we have the type, and we have the content. And the idea here is that anytime somebody does something on our app, so they send a message, they send a message into a group chat, or they leave a comment, they reply to a comment, etc., we are going to be logging this information right into this table here. So we're going to be storing the current user that is available in the trigger, And we're also going to be storing things like the type of event, so like maybe a comment, a message, a group chat, etc., as well as the actual content, provided it's not private and we have access to it, etc., etc. So now let's go ahead and let's jump back into BuildShip, and you can click here now. And now if you scroll down, if you go into Supabase, you have tons and tons of different operations that you can invoke as part of your workflow. So things like get row, get columns, delete row, create row, RPC, update row, etc., etc. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to create a row. So we're going to select this operation here, add, and now we have a new module that we need to set up. Okay, so this module is going to get executed in response to this trigger right here. So now let's go ahead and configure it. So we need things like the API key, the API URL, the table name, as well as the actual data that we're going to be sending into that new table for that's going to be logging things. So let's go back into Supabase here, project settings, API, and here you can copy all kinds of useful information. And trust me, you're going to be spending a lots of time on this page. Anytime you're going to be, integrating with your Supabase instance. Okay, so if you're going to be connecting from Flutterflow, if you're going to be connecting from BuildShip, this is a page that you're going to be basically living on. Okay, so the first thing we need is the URL. Come back to BuildShip. We have this URL, paste it in here. The next thing we need is this a non-public key. Okay, you never want to be sharing the secret key. Okay, you want to be just using this key here. Copy this here, come back here, paste it in here. Next, we need the table name, and the table name, I think it's a activity log. So come back here, a activity log. Now for the object, this is where we need to specify a JSON object with key value pairs. Okay, so the object is going to look very, very similar to this object right here. So if you take a look at the logs here and you see this object here, right? You see this record here. This is exactly what our object is going to look like. So you can even copy in here, come back here, and you can paste it, right? You can do something like this, and then you can kind of work off this object, okay? And so once you paste it in here, you want to pick the fields that we just care about. So we care about user ID, and then we care about content, and we care about type. So type and content. So I'm going to put type, and I'm going to put content, okay? So this essentially will allow us to log the user ID of the current user, the type, and the content. Now the user ID we want to pick up from this trigger, right? We don't want to have a static user ID. Okay, so I'm going to delete this, and now we can do, because we know the record here, we can start typing the record. Okay, so we can type the record, and then you can select the user ID. So if you come over here, it says here user ID. So if you come back here, you can just type user ID here. Okay, and that's going to give you the user ID that was inserted into that other table that triggered this entire workflow, which is the currently authenticated user, because that's how we have it set up in the app. Now for the type, you can decide what you want to do. So as an example, let's say we add something like add comment. And for the content, well, we have access to the content. This is this post content here. So I'm going to type record, and I'm going to type post content. So now we have a JSON object that's going to be inserted into that other table, this activity log table. So we're going to exit out and close this. And very, very important, you want to click on ship. You want to deploy this workflow, because if you don't, then, the system does not know about this row. Okay, you always want to be deploying. And so now this has been deployed, which means that we have a trigger on user posts. And when it's triggered, it's going to enter it's going to add a new activity log record. Okay. So let's go ahead into Supabase here, click on activity log. It should be empty. And as you can see, this is empty because we haven't really done anything just yet. And now if you go back to our app here, and as you can see, we are seeing those previous comments. Now, if we write a new comment here, if you write a new post, that should trigger our new workflow, and that should create a record in that activity table. So let's take a look at the activity table. It is completely empty. Come back here, click on write post, and let's see what happens. So now if we come back here, we have a new record in this activity table. Okay, so it says here the user ID, which is the current logged in user ID that was provided by the trigger. We have the type, which is add comment, and we have the content here. So if we go back to our app, What is the content? Yeah, it starts with NXS and it ends with OYI. Okay, so if we go back here, there's the comment, right? NXS, OYI, okay? And the type is add comment, okay? And so now what we've done is we created a trigger that automatically logs anything that happens to this user post. So if you are using user posts all over your app, and typically you're going to be using this kind of table everywhere, right? Because it contains various posts. You're also going to have automatic log records created in this table. And that is very, very useful in all kinds of real production apps. You definitely want to have the ability to do that. Now, let me show you another very, very popular scenario where creating these triggers is going to be absolutely invaluable. Now, here on this page, you are looking at a product that a user may want to purchase. Now, there's all kinds of information about this product. We have an image of the shoe. We have the name, we have the reviews, description. You can pick a size, you can, check out with Apple Pay, you can add to cart. Another important piece of information that we have on this page is the stock remaining. So right now there are 100 pieces of this product that is available to our customers. And if we click on this button, this stock remaining will go down by 1. So assuming this add to cart workflow is where the user actually checks out and buys the product, we are going to automatically decrease the stock remaining. So if I click on add to cart, this decreases the stock remaining, okay? Because assuming the person will go through with the purchase, we now have 99 pieces remaining. If I click on this right here, now we have 98 pieces remaining. If I click on this right here, now we have 97 pieces remaining. Now, let's say you want to be notified anytime this stock here, this number of items that we have, the stock level here, goes below a certain amount. So maybe that amount is 10. Maybe that amount is 50. Maybe that amount is 90. Maybe you had 1,000 pieces and you're down to 97 and you want to be notified when that amount goes below 90 or when it reaches 90 or below. You want to have an email sent. You want some kind of notification or maybe have a message sent to your phone or etc., etc. But the point is you want this to be automatic. Well, this is another scenario where you can easily solve this problem with triggers, because triggers respond instantly on any kind of data change. So let's go jump back into BuildShip and let me show you how you can create a trigger that does that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new trigger here and I'm going to call it stock notifier. Okay, click create. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a trigger, Supabase trigger. We're going to add this trigger. We're going to set it up, connect it to my account. And now I need to specify the table that we're going to be listening to. Now, right off the bat, I know that the event that I'm interested in is this update event. Okay, because essentially in the backend right now, I'm updating the field that contains the number, the stock level, right? So if it was 100, I'm updating it to 99. Updating it to 91. I'm basically decreasing it by 1 anytime the user presses the button. So we're going to leave this to update and then we're going to fill in the rest of these fields here. So let's go ahead back to our project reference. It's the same reference, copy it here, paste it here. Now the table name is going to be different, right? The table name is A_inventory_level. So if you click here, we have this one product and we are storing the stock level, the number of items left in stock, as a field here, as a number. So this is what we need to be, paying attention to, this field right here. So this is the name of the table. Come back here, put a inventory levels here. Okay. Now we're gonna deploy this so that this specific trigger is now live. And we can test it out because we can always read the logs just to see what kind of data that we're dealing with, right? And because we have this update event now, we're also going to be getting this, the old record as well as the new record. That way we can compare the changes and see what happened. But in this case, we probably don't really care about the old record. We only care about the new record, more specifically the stock level. So this has been deployed. We have this right here. We can open it up. We can do auto fetch. And that's going to automatically fetch the log information for this workflow here, okay? So let's go back to our app here and let's do an add to cart, which is going to decrement a specific field in that table for the record. So add to cart. Now it's 96. Let's go back to BuildShip, and here you have the log message. So we have the old record here, and we can kind of collapse that. And we have the new record. This is the record. And as you can see, stock is 96 here, and for the old record, stock is 97. Now, there are situations where you need to compare data, right? So you're looking for changes, and you need to see what the data was before the update and what the data was after the update. In this case, we don't really care about before. We only care about the current stock level. So we don't really care about the old record here that had 97. We only care about this new one that has 96. And so what we can do here is we can create a condition that checks that new record and sees if it went below a certain value. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to add a branch, and I'm going to add a node. And now what we can do is we can create some kind of logic that happens anytime that specific stock level went below a certain amount. And let's go ahead and create a condition. So we're going to click here, and now we need to specify the kind of condition. So let's go ahead and type record here. If you type record, you get access to that new record that we have. And let's go ahead and open this log just so that I can pick up on the exact field name, right? You do not want to misspell the actual field name. So here's, it's actually just stock. So it's record period stocks. And here I can create various logic. So I have record stock, and I can say, well, record stock went below 90. This is my condition. And it's going to be true when stock is below 90. So once it's 89, it's going to be true. If it's 88, it's going to be true. And here, I want something to happen, right? Maybe I want an email, or I want to, modify another row in another table, or I want something to be done. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a logging node, right? So I'm just going to log a message to the console just to say something. Okay, we are running low on stock. So I'm going to say something like this: running low on stock. Okay. And so now we have this. Now in this else condition, we don't really need to do anything. But what I can do is I can also create a logging, and I'm going to do a log message to the console, and I'm going to say stock levels are fine. And so these two modules are going to simulate various actions that we're going to be taking in our app based on the stock level. So now I'm going to go ahead and deploy this right here. Okay, so workflow successfully deployed. Now this workflow is in the cloud. It's going to be executed with this trigger. All right, so now let's go back to our app here. And as you can see, stock remaining is 96 here. And remember, our condition is checking whether stock levels are below 90. And so in this case, we're going to click on add to cart. This is going to go to 95 here. And if we go back to our workflow here, we can open this up, and here we can take a look at this last log message. So if we come back here, it says here stock levels are fine, and that is because it's above 90, which meant that this part has executed, right? We're still waiting for this to execute. So now what we can do is we can go back to our app and click this button a couple of times. So this goes below 90. So I'm going to click here. Now it's 94. It's still stock levels are fine. Click here. 93, 92, 91. Let's go back and check just to make sure that it's being executed correctly. Okay. So let's go ahead and make sure we fetch the last one. Okay. This is the last one. And it says here stock levels are fine. Okay, so now we're getting close to having low stock levels. So we're going to click on add to cart. It's still 90, which is okay because we're looking for that less than 90. And now when we click here, 89. Okay, so now we can go back to BuildShip, and let's make sure that we're only looking at the last one. Sometimes I like to do this just to kind of refresh. Okay, so we open this up. And now it's telling us running low on stock. And obviously you can add more nodes. You can click here and you can do, email. You can, you have various email integrations. You can use something like SendGrid. You can use, all of these different integrations, but probably you're going to be using SendGrid to send a static email, to send a dynamic email. So here you can add a static email. And if you want to use the SendGrid integration, you obviously need to have an API key. So you can sign up for a free account. They have a generous free plan. you can get an API key, and then you can simply fill out the rest of these fields. So like from address, from name, to address, email, body, and you're going to be notified as long as the stock levels are below the specified amount. Okay, and obviously I'm using a fixed number, I'm using 90, but you can get this value from another table, right? Because this trigger, when it's triggered, it sends all the values, right? It sends all the values to the rest of this workflow. So you can pick up a value from another field in the table, and you can use that value. You can get that value anywhere you want. Anytime you're using literal or static data, you can always convert it to dynamic variables. That is never an issue. But the end result is we have an app that will automatically do something when a certain event happens. And believe me, you do not want to have an app that does not work in real time when you're dealing with stock levels or when you're dealing with messages. You want things to happen in real time. You wanna be able to respond as it happens, right? Very, very important. And this is where triggers save the day once again. Now, there's one last scenario where creating triggers can be very, very helpful, and that is the case where you simply want to sync one table to another. So let's say you have this A user post here that contains the various posts that your users are leaving throughout your app. So different posts for businesses, for various establishments, or replies to different posts, all kinds of different messages. And what you want to do is you want to create another copy of this table. And so here I have another table called A user post 2, and this is essentially a duplicate of this table. So all the same fields, all the same things, all the same schema. And so now what I want to do is anytime there's a new record created on this table, I want to make sure that this record is also inserted in this table as well. Well, that is also very, very straightforward to do with triggers. And in fact, triggers is probably the only way that gives you this functionality. And so let's jump back into BuildShip. And what we can do is we can create another trigger on that table to do something specific. And in fact, we already have a trigger on this table here because we are logging all the information in another table. And so instead of creating a brand new trigger and a brand new workflow, we can simply add another module that will take all the data here and simply insert it as a new record into that A user post 2 table. So I'm just going to add a new module right here, type Supabase, find, create row, add my row. And in fact, another thing that I can do is I can delete this and I can just copy it here, click here, paste from clipboard, and now I have a copy. I don't need to go and fetch all these variables or copy and paste. And here I can just change the table name, A user post 2, I believe it's called. Let me go ahead and double check, A user post 2. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to set up this JSON object that's going to have the key value pairs as a record for this new table. Now there's a quick shortcut. We can simply open up the logging, go to one of the last successful transactions here, open it up, expand it, scroll down, open this one right here and find the record, right? So this record right here, this was sent to us as part of a trigger. So this pertains to this one right here. So what we can do is we can simply copy this record here, close that, open this, and paste it here. And we can simply model our JSON object on the data that we're getting as part of this trigger, because these tables are identical. So this is the same data. Now we don't need created add, because that's going to be done automatically. We don't need ID, but everything else we need, except we need to make sure this is all dynamic. So I'm going to delete the values and I'm going to type record, user ID, comma, user ID is going to be the same as this, right? Same thing here, record, num comments, comma, same thing here, record, num likes, and same thing here, record, post content. Okay, and that's it. Now, if you get out, we have a trigger now with 2 nodes, right? So we're going to be saving the activity, the logging information, right, in this activity log. And we're also going to be duplicating the new record that was inserted into this table as well. So let's go ahead and deploy it. Very, very important. You always want to be deploying, because if you're testing it like this, you don't have this module here in the cloud just yet. This is now deployed successfully. And so now if we go back to our app and we add a new record, we should have a duplicate of that record in another table here. So I'm gonna scroll down, I'm gonna write a new post, and so now we have a new post here. Go back to Supabase, and we have a new record as a duplicate in the second table. So if we go to this first table, it's user post, and this is this last table here, right? So this FY6990. If we come back over here, 6990 FY. Okay, so it's the exact copy. And if I do that again, come back here, write new post. Now we have 7322. Come back here, we should have the new record 7322, okay, as well as that record right here 7322. Okay, so this is yet another real world application where triggers essentially save the day, because you can't really do it without triggers, right? You can't really do it without triggers, because triggers enable this real-time behavior, and BuildShip comes in and makes it super easy and simple to do exactly what you want in response to a trigger, because otherwise it gets a little complicated. And I know the more complicated it is, the more people it's going to scare away, right? So if you have an easy way of doing it, a simple way of doing it, by simply creating these new modules, more people are going to be taking advantage of this functionality, and as a result, they're going to be building more complex, more sophisticated, more robust apps. Now, the app that I was demonstrating here is actually very simple. We're simply adding new records here in our database. Here we are updating our stock remaining field. It's actually very straightforward, and as a result, I do not feel it's necessary to go over how exactly I build this app. But if you are curious how I build this app, I will make this entire app available on my Patreon page, and as a result, you'll be able to view and or clone this exact app. And I'll also make available the BuildShip workflows as well. All of that is going to be on my Patreon page. And so if you're not yet a member of our amazing Patreon community, then you're definitely missing out big time, because when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're not only going to get access to this app right here, and there's some interesting things that I'm doing here that you guys may find very useful, but you're also going to get access to all the apps that I built on this channel. There are over, I think, 150 apps by now. Maybe there are even more. And you're going to get access to all of them, and there are all kinds of different niches. They do all kinds of different things. So regardless of what kind of app that you are building right now, or what kind of app you're planning to build in the future, chances are I've built an app like that before. And so instead of wasting time searching the documentation, asking questions, and kind of studying various things, you can get started very quickly by simply cloning one of the apps, or several apps, or all of them if you want, and use that as a base for an app that you're building now, or maybe you're planning to build in the future. And that's not all. When you join our amazing Patreon community, you're also going to get access to some other content, such as Q&As, behind the scenes content, as well as our Patreon supported masterclass deep dives, where I pick a particular topic or an app or a tool, and I do a deep dive video on it. And in fact, I recently did one, and I also recently did a Q&A that a lot of people really like. So if you're serious about building apps without writing code, without dealing with all of these debuggers and sitting and actually typing all the code, you want to use modern no-code builders, you want to know all the different tools and the best ways of using them, and making sure that you are using them to the fullest, that you're leveraging everything that you're given, that you definitely owe it to yourself to check out and become a member of our amazing Patreon community. And above and beyond, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work. So if you're getting any kind of value with any of these videos that I'm putting out in all kinds of different topics, reviewing different kinds of apps, different tools, showing you various techniques, then you definitely owe it to yourself to learn more about it and perhaps become a member. And you can do just that via the link in the description below the video.